knowledge about what they're voting for. So that's where we come in, and we advocate on free market issues in South Carolina. So we don't really get into social issues like abortion and things like that. There is something called Palmetto Family Council that does those areas, and we're glad they work on that, but we stick to tax, education, healthcare, and energy. So we've been around for 12 years now, and I have been the president now for 2 years. So 2 years ago, our president was elected to be the state superintendent of education. So her name is Ellen Weaver. You might be familiar with her. So she was the president. I happened to be on the board of directors, and we were looking for a new president, and somehow I ended up being the new president, so here I am. I'm a businesswoman from South Carolina. I'm not a policy person, but I do love policy. And I moved down here from Michigan almost 12 years ago now, about the same time as Palmetto Promise was created, because I wanted to be free. And I love South Carolina so much, and I want it to be the best it can be. And we have so much potential here, compared to, for example, where I came from, Michigan, where you almost just have no hope. There's no hope for making it better. Here we have a lot of hope. We have a lot of great things, but we have a lot of ways that we can improve. So I wanted to give you just a quick update on things that are happening right now that are very important in the State House. So one thing that's been really a passion of ours for,
Can I ask a question? So
Sure.
when you say they're part-time, like how much time do they have to spend there a year?
Yeah, so they are 3 days a week, January through May. So Tuesday through Thursday, January through May. So they come back sometimes for a special session off, in the summer or the fall if there's something like COVID or something like that comes up. But their regular session is January through May. And most of them have full-time careers, because I think they only get paid like $11,000 or $12,000 a year. So you really can't make that your career unless maybe you're retired or whatever. So a lot of them have full-time jobs. Maybe they're real estate agents, they're in insurance, or they're attorneys or whatever. So, and they don't have a lot of staff. So that's again where we come in. So the number one issue that we sure, go ahead.
Right in the same line as
Sure.
the right question.
Sure.
Right? Who is part-time? At what point in each January and May term do they take up that state budget?
That's usually one of the first things that they do.
So they do that first.
And it takes up a lot of time every session.
And they don't go home until, they don't leave till it's done.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that, but no, that it takes up a lot of time every session, and it gets in the way of, I'm just gotta get done, right? But it gets in the way of a lot of other things that need to get done, because it is such a short session and there are so many important issues. So we passed a school choice bill here, finally. I know you've probably seen a lot of other states are going to universal school choice. We've been working on school choice here in South Carolina for like 10 years. And in 2023, we finally passed an education scholarship account bill. The way an education scholarship account works is that the state portion of funds, in this case it was $6,000, the state portion of education funds goes into an account that the parent can then direct towards approved expenses. Tuition, tutoring, transportation, uniforms, curriculum, anything that's related to education. We had about 800 families sign up for that program and enroll their children into private school. And in March of 2024, so the program will kick in the fall of 2024. So it just, the kids just started to school. In March of 2024, the NEA and the NAACP sued to stop the program. And the arguments were heard in the first week of March of 2024. The court in South Carolina, which at the time the Chief Justice was a very anti-school choice Democrat, held the decision for 6 months, which they didn't need to do, until the middle of September 2024, which means the kids were already in school, in their new schools for 6 weeks, when they came in and they said, it's unconstitutional, you can't spend the money on tuition at a private school, because we have something in South Carolina called the Blaine Amendment. Now, other states have Blaine amendments, and other states that have Blaine amendments have ESAs that have been found constitutional, but because of the makeup of the court, what happened is we had one conservative justice recuse himself because he had a connection with a private school. He was replaced by the liberal chief justice by another liberal, and we lost 3-2 when we should have won 3-2. So the rug got pulled out from under these families, and they were devastated. Well, they knew that we had been involved in passing this legislation, so they came to us saying, what are we going to do? So we went and recorded a lot of their personal stories, and we tried to get the legislatures to come back early to fix it, come back in the fall, and they would have to call a special session. They did not do that, unfortunately. So I decided for the health of school choice in South Carolina and for the sake of these low-income children, we're talking about families that are 200% of poverty or below, which is about $60,000 for a family of 4 or below. There's no way they can pay the tuition themselves. I decided to go out and try to raise the money to keep them in place in their current schools until we could get a new bill passed. The reason I wanted to do that is that I wanted these families and the schools not to be afraid to participate next year when we get the bill back. Because if I'm a school and I took some of them, dozens of these ESA kids, and I hired a teacher and then they took it away and I had to fire a teacher and all of this, I would probably say I'm not going to try that again. I'm probably just going to only just have kids in my school that I know can pay. So for the health of school choice in South Carolina, I wanted to keep the kids in place. So I've been able to do that so far. I needed a raise. I need to raise $3 million to get them through the end of the year. I raised $2.5 million so far. So I've got until April to raise another $500,000. So the last donation I got was $250,000 from Betsy DeVos. So most of my donations have come from out of state, very generous people who care about the kids of South Carolina, who are moved by their story and care about school choice. So the kids are in place right now. We're sending the money to the schools to keep them there. I'm working on that, and now the school choice bill is back in the State House. So a school choice bill, new bill, just passed the Senate 2 weeks ago, and now this week on Wednesday there's going to be a hearing in the House. So we've got to get it through the House, and then the House version is going to be different than the Senate version. So we've got to get them to come together and agree. So that is sort of that's going to be sort of the difficult part, is to get them to agree on, they both have their ideas about how it should go. And then the great news is we have a new court. The Chief Justice that was against us has retired. The new Chief Justice is the gentleman who wrote the dissenting opinion in our favor. So if we have that one judge recuse himself again, he'll be replaced by the new Chief Justice. And then the new judge who's on, we believe, is also pro-school choice. So we believe that once it gets sued again, we will get through the court and it will finally be in place in South Carolina. So finally, our kids will have the same opportunity that Florida's kids have, Arizona, Oklahoma, West Virginia, many red states across the country are doing this. And we have to do it because education in South Carolina, as we all know, is at the bottom of the rest of the country. I mean, and we have...
Where do we stand? Like 49th or something?
It varies, but it's usually 48th or 49th. And it depends whether you're talking about math or reading.
This is a deal where it only kicks in if you're 200% above the poverty level. That's the only time you can use it.
Well, that was for year one.
Okay.
So the intention of it is for it to grow. So
that everybody could do it at some point?
We would eventually love to see it go to universal. The bill that just came out of the Senate cuts off at 400% of poverty.
Okay. What's poverty level? Is it?
It's about 30,000.
It's about 120,000.
For a family of 4, 30,000.
Right.
So yeah, so that's of course, and then you have to add back some non-taxable stuff. So we had some issues with some families who thought they would qualify, but then they had to add back military housing benefits, things that are non-taxable, and then they were disqualified. So it starts with 5,000 openings, 200%, 10,000 openings at 300%, 15,000 openings at 400%, and that right now that's where it stops. We would want to see it eventually go to universal, to where any child who wants to go somewhere else can go somewhere else, and the money follows the child. So, of course, we hear a lot of people say that we're defunding the public school. Nothing could be further from the truth, and I'll explain why. Because the only amount that follows the child is the the state tax dollar. The local amount and the federal amount stays in the district where the child resides. So you have an average of about $18,000 a child per child per student gets paid in South Carolina schools. The amount of the ESA is only $6,000. The rest of that money stays into a district where they're not even having to educate the child. But the school, the teachers, everyone, they all come out hard against it because, the status quo is what they're used to.
And when you say 10,000 or 12,000, is it first come, first serve?
So the way that the bill is structured right now is the families that are already in it get first dibs, and of course they're the lowest income families. And then it'll open up to further. And the way the bill worked that just got called unconstitutional, one of the downsides of it is it had a really short window to apply. So it was January 15th to March 15th, 2024. But that's, the reason why we only have like 800 or 900 students and there were 5,000 openings is because when you get in there to start doing the application, you have to download a lot of things. And we're talking about families that maybe English isn't their first language, they're low income, they maybe don't have access to computers, and they just didn't get the applications filled out on time. Or they had to add back certain things and it pushed them just over the income limit, so they didn't qualify. So with the new bill that we're looking for, it's an open-ended application window, so that as long as there are available slots, you can continue to apply. And so that was one of the changes that we pushed for. And then the other change that we pushed for that's in there is that if you currently attend private school, but you fall under that income limit, you can qualify. In the old bill, if you currently attended private school, you were out of luck, even if you fell under that low income limit. Maybe your grandma was helping you, maybe your aunt was helping you, maybe you were getting a scholarship through the school or whatever. You didn't qualify as long as you were attending. So I had families call me and say, what should I do? Should I pull my child out and put them in public school for a year and then put them back in? And couldn't answer that question. I mean, that's a terrible choice to have to make. So it's very, very important that we get this done, and I think the iron is hot right now for us to get it done, and I believe we will. It's just going to be harder than it should be because everybody kind of has their ideas, and the legislature hears a lot from the teachers, and some of them, their wife is a teacher, or their mom was a teacher, or whatever, and they're conflicted, So, but we're not conflicted. We believe that every family should have the right to decide what the best education for their child. So, I mean, my own personal story, we were living, this is where in Michigan, we were in a good school district, but my son has a learning disability called auditory processing disorder. They just really couldn't accommodate him at all, and I fought for 4 years with IEPs and everything. He was miserable. I was able to pull him out and put him into a private Christian school where I said, all he needs is the face front and he needs written materials. They did it. They said, sure. And it was like, the angels sang, the skies opened up, it was everything that we wanted. He was not crying every night. He's in college now. He goes to Coastal Carolina for IT. And it changed his life, but I could afford to do that. And that's not fair because other families couldn't afford to do it and their child was slipping through the cracks, even in a good school, because education is not one size fits all for every child. So that's what we believe, and we're going to continue to push for that. Now, there are some people who say, well, we need to just get the Blaine Amendment out of the Constitution, which we're not against that, but we don't believe we have to do that because, like I mentioned, other states that have Blaine Amendments also have ESA programs.
What's the amendment say?
The amendment used to say that you cannot have state money going directly or indirectly to a private school. But back in the 70s, they struck out the or indirectly. So now it says state dollars cannot go directly to a private school. So in other states that have similar language, the ESA mechanism where the money goes into an account and then the parent directs the funds counts as indirect. And when the justice who wrote the dissenting opinion pointed that out in his dissent, that he believes that using the ESA gets around the direct, and it makes it be indirect funding. So, you know, there could be an effort if we failed again, heaven forbid, if we failed again in the court to get the Blaine Amendment out of the Constitution. It's a heavy lift though, because you have to have 2/3 of the House, 2/3 of the Senate, and then it goes on a ballot. As soon as it goes on the ballot, money pours in from outside, from the left, from the NEA, all that to do campaigns against it, about how you're going to defund the public school, all this stuff. And so you stand a chance of losing. And all these families that are in the program will have to wait. All these kids will have to go back to public school. And once your child has been, you know, in and out and forced around, again, you're probably not gonna participate again. So we believe we can get around that by going back to court with a new bill. So that's something that we're really excited about, and it's moving right now. Another thing that I want to talk about just really quick is tax reform. We have the highest individual tax rate in the Southeast. As a matter of fact, I was surprised when I moved down from Michigan, my tax rate was 4.25%, and when I moved down here it was 7%. I didn't expect to pay more in personal income tax here than I did in Michigan. But we also have, of course, lower property tax, and you have to factor it all in. But we have high personal income tax. We have high, I'm sure you all here have the high sales tax like we have in South Carolina, in Charleston County. I mean, you go out to eat and it's like 10% on top of your bill. We have high property tax if you have a second home. You've got really high property tax on that. You've got high corporate tax. We have a 5% corporate tax. North Carolina is going to 0. So if we're going to be competing with North Carolina for businesses, we got to get, you know, that's a big difference there. So we've got a whole report. If you go to our website, we've got a whole report that we did on how our tax structure compares to our neighbors and how we recommend that it gets changed. Sometimes I talk to people from up north and I say we have high taxes and they kind of laugh because where they came from is higher. But I have to remind them we're not competing with New York, we're not competing with California, we're competing with North Carolina, Georgia, and Florida for businesses. And so that's who we have to be thinking about when we're talking about taxes. So that's something that we believe is going to move. They're talking about it in the State House, so we're going to be there to testify, and we've given them our report so that at least they have sort of somewhere to start from when they're looking at what changes they want to make. Another big issue, and it's a very hot topic, and it's controversial in some areas, is tort reform. So we have a lot of lawyer legislators in the legislature, and they probably don't want tort reform, but it's something that's got to happen because we have a lot of businesses closing in South Carolina because they can't afford their insurance anymore, because their liquor liability, especially their liquor liability insurance, has gone totally skyrocketed in the last few years, and there are a few reasons for that. One is a law that was passed by the State House a few years ago that said if you serve alcohol, you have to have $1 million worth of insurance for your business, and that's really, you know, gotten expensive. And also we have something called joint and several liability here. So basically that means regardless of what percentage fault you were, you might still have to pay the whole judgment because you have the deepest pocket. So for example, we all know about the Murdoch case and the boat crash. And I'm not sure if you'll know about the young lady who died in the boat crash. Her family sued several people, several groups. It was Parker's convenience store, and there was, I think, a house party and a little bar that they went to.
Luther's.
Right. Well, Who do you think paid the $15 million, the entire $15 million judgment? Parker's. Parker's. Even though they were not 100% at fault. In fact, they were probably maybe 25% at fault. I mean, maybe even less. And the problem is that Parker's now only has one insurance company that will insure them in South Carolina.
I was gonna say, not to interrupt you, but
Yeah.
there are a lot of insurance companies closing up around here.
Correct.
They don't want to insure anybody down. We are having an issue, I don't know if you all know about it, with HDF and some of the people that are doing fundraisers in the area at private homes, because someone had an accident who was a docent, fell and sued for like $10 million or something, $5 million. And it's a huge issue in Beaufort alone. But I suspect everywhere in the area.
Oh, absolutely.
And
My
we're
homeowner's
having-
insurance, when we bought the house in 2003, was
Right.
less than $900 a
Yes.
year. I got the new bill in, and it's well over $5,000, $5,600.
Right. And then now, the people that, the nonprofits that are trying to raise money around here to keep our little historic Beaufort and all that stuff going are having a lot of trouble getting a $5 million insurance policy, which they need to throw these events in private homes. So it's a huge issue here.
It is. It's a huge issue across the state. And we have businesses closing. And you know, one of the things that I've heard some of the liability lawyers suggesting is, well, we should just cap how much insurance companies can charge. Well, you know, that's why they had all those fires in California and all those homes weren't insured.
Right.
We
Because
can't-
all the insurance companies pulled out.
Yes.
They put a cap on the insurance.
Correct.
And everybody just left California.
Exactly.
So we ended up paying for it.
Right, and we can't let that happen here, because, I mean, I live on the coast, you live on the coast, we have to have insurance on our homes if a hurricane comes through. So, so that's something that, you know, we're already getting a lot of flack from some of the, what I call slip and fall attorneys, pushing back against, because that's their livelihood, right? They have $10 million houses because of the way the system is. They want it to stay that way. But it needs to be reformed. It's going to be hard. The Senate has a very good bill, but the House we're going to struggle in the House on it. And it may not be something we get done this year, but we're going to keep plugging away on it. We've got a good report on our website about this, and we did a calculation about how much, what we're calling it the lawsuit tax, how much does it add to each household per year in South Carolina? We calculated it's costing each household an extra $3,181 per year because of all the extra money that we have to pay due to...
Is there a list of representatives that we should contact on these bills?
Well, yeah,
That would be useful.
it's always the most effective if you contact your own House rep and your own senator, because they really want to hear that you are their constituent.
Okay. Well, of course.
If you contact someone that is not, they go, well, I don't care, that person can't vote for me anyway.
Yeah.
But if you can contact your own, it's always very, very effective. And if they get 5 phone calls on an issue, it's
There's a formula, and I found that out when we were doing a protest outside of Beer Can Joe Cunningham. Remember Beer Can Joe? If one person makes a phone call or walks in, all right, they got your name. 2 people, they think, wait a minute.
Exactly.
You get 3 or 4, they start to listen. And when you walk in their offices, you make sure you have them write down your name and contact information.
Right.
And every time you make that phone call, every time you send an email, every time you walk in their office, they will note that you have done it and how many times you have been there. And next time you pick up the phone, they will be on the other end. Mm-hmm. I'm telling you, at one point, I contacted Mark Sanford so many times when he was our congressman that I sent him a text when he was on the House floor. They were voting for Speaker of the House. And I said, are you crazy, when he was voting for the person he was voting for? And you know what? He texted me right back from the House floor. They will stand up and they will listen. When I was having this fight with the sales tax, I turned around, called directly into Wes Newton's office. Within minutes, he was back on the phone with me. And I says, Wes, you were county council chair. You know what I'm talking about. I need your advice. And he sat and spent time with me. So, I mean, you make those phone calls, you show up in person, and they will stand up and listen. And we make changes that way.
Why keep trying to call Lindsay Graham's office?
Oh, Lindsey Graham's, that's another story.
Yeah, and obviously, always be respectful, because if you're not, then immediately they immediately brush you off as being crazy, but.
Well, he made the mistake of inviting me and my late husband to a fundraiser down at what was Kathleen's. And I'll tell you what, I physically stood there nose to nose and toe to toe with Lindsey Graham. And if anyone met him, I'm all of 5'3". Lindsey Graham is approximately 5'3". And I got in his face, and I actually got him to change his vote on an issue. And I got him to change his vote on 2 issues, not the third, that dealt with veterans voting military voting overseas. I told them the ballots were not going to get to them in time for them to make their vote, and they need 45 days. That's the one issue, and believe it or not, being a military man, he wouldn't step down. But it was to the point where his aide just turned around and took me by the shoulders and said, okay, but changed his vote. It makes a deal.
Well, I've been trying to call, this is just a perfect example, Mitch McConnell's office. While I'm not a constituent, we pay his salary, whether or not we want to. There is one thorn in the side of the Trump administration. You can't get through to his office, period. And he still controls money, even though he's no longer.
But you can get through to Tim Scott easily.
Yes.
And
it's not supposed to be a control.
And Graham's staff will pick up the phone,
Yeah.
and they can then apply pressure.
Yes.
And that's the way we have to do it. Yeah.
I'm just disgusted that we are forced to pay their salary, but we can't get through to their office.
That's why we reach out to sometimes to national groups and let them, on our behalf, apply the pressure.
Yeah.
So those are kind of the top 3 things that we're looking at. Now, there are a couple of other things that are just a little bit on this.
Well, I'd like to add, because you have on here the cost of energy.
Yes.
And this is something that is in Bill Taylor's latest newsletter. And when I send out my emails after this, I'll have a copy of this attached. Bill Taylor. He's a House representative, upcountry. But this was in the State of the State address by McMaster recently, where he talked about reopening the construction for the nuclear power plants that we paid for on our energy bill.
Exactly.
Redoing that, redoing some of the gas plant, also cracking down on all of that, getting our energy needs up where we can lower our monthly bill. Not only that, but be energy independent as a state and not require any outside sources. They're still going to pursue the stuff as green energy, but they're also going to start looking at drilling. And that is something that I've been fighting for, getting to drill off the coast. And everyone's going, oh, it's going to ruin the fishing and everything else. What people don't understand is these oil platforms that are offshore will not be in the line of sight from the shoreline. They'll be off the shelf. All right, at this point, when you have an oil platform out there, it becomes a platform for migratory birds as well as for fish. You'll find more coral, they treat it like a coral. And you'll find more healthier fishing off our coast. And our fishing has been depleted. So those oil platforms serve as a benefit to our economy. The fishing industry, the tourism industry. When the Gulf of Mexico finally allowed the oil drilling back in the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America, yes. When they finally opened it back up over there, the Gulf of America, the red snapper had completely disappeared. Once they got the platforms back, within a short period of time, the red snapper became so popular that the Gulf was known for the red snappers.
Well, I'd rather have that than windmills.
Well, I have a little bit of an interesting perspective on that, and that's my daughter is a geologist and she works in oil and gas, and she goes out onto these oil platforms in the Gulf of America. She leaves out of port in Louisiana. It's a 2-hour helicopter flight for her from the port out to the oil
Yeah, you
platform.
can't see it.
That's how far away it is.
Yeah, they're not in line of sight.
It's gonna be right on the beach.
But
It's not.
once they open up the oil drilling out there off the shore, you know what that does to our tourist industry and other industries?
Yes.
That will come in, because now hotels, in order for the workers to come in, now bars and restaurants will have customers to supply as they come in and do their shore leave. Schools will have more kids going to them because they bring their families. It will increase our economy. So every time they say, oh no, you're going to kill the environment. What do you want, a wind farm that's going to turn around and beach the whales?
Exactly.
Hey, Ann, have you watched the TV show Landman yet?
Oh, heck yeah.
We were
Okay.
What is it?
Landman.
landmine.
Landman.
Landman. You gotta watch that, because you may not want those workers. But serious observation.
I've had friends that worked on them, and some of the loveliest people.
I'm fascinated by it. I've got relatives in Texas, God bless. What do we know about the oil offshore South Carolina? Is there anybody interested in actually drilling for it, or?
As far as I know, your daughter probably can tell you better. Last I know, the exploration goes back to the 1970s. That's something else we need, because if we do more drilling, we need refineries. No new refineries have been built since the 1970s.
I agree with that.
What are we going to do? Get this oil, and what are we going to do? Ship it over to China to be refined, which is what we're doing now, China and India?
We're importing all of our oil now.
Yes, send it over to them, they'll refine it and sell it back to us. Brilliant.
Yeah, there's jobs there.
But we do definitely have information and recommendations on energy. One of the things, like you mentioned, is everyone stop being in fear of nuclear. There's something called SMRs, or small modular reactors.
Which is what they were talking about
Yes.
at the State of the State.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, a friend of mine, my co-host, was on a nuclear submarine. And these are portable reactors that you can turn around and plant somewhere outside of, say, a new AI facility. And you can actually then power that facility.
And we're going
And
to
it's
need a
clean
lot of
energy.
energy for the new technologies and the computers that have to run and everything if we want to be brought up in the current.
And if we want to bring our state economy, what best way to entice the AI industry to our state? I mean, those are big buck jobs.
Yeah, and we have to have the energy to support it.
Did Dominion just get another rate increase in South Carolina?
Yeah, they did.
So, again, if you go to palmetto.org, go to the bottom, sign up for our newsletter. We just send out one per week, but also you can look, we have our Freedom Agenda, which is basically 20 issues that we want to see the legislature do in this session. And you can click on each one. All the resources around that topic are there. We'll have a video. We'll have all the writings that we've done, all the research papers that we've done on it. And we give that directly to the legislators in the hopes that they will then do their homework on the issues. And we want to make it as easy as possible for them because they do get so much paper and they do get so much information on them. So we just basically have and I should have brought it with me and I didn't. We just basically have a bifold thing that has a QR code that sends them to this page, and it's got all of the information that they need. If they just want to watch a 3-minute video, they can watch a video. If they want to do a deep dive, they can do that too. And of course, we will go and testify in front of the legislature. And something that really struck me when I started to do this job, and I'll just say this, we're not lobbyists, but when you go to the lobby, it's full of lobbyists, and they represent a particular interest or particular industry. The teachers have a lobby. The Manufactured Housing Association has a lobby. The doctors have a lobby. The hospitals have lobbyists. Everybody has a lobbyist, but we're there to speak for what's best for all South Carolinians. And so if we're not there giving that perspective, then they're hearing from the lobbyists from the Hospital Association. So we passed, a quick story, in 2023, we passed a repeal of Certificate of Need. Most people don't know what that is, but Certificate of Need was a very anti-free market law that said if you wanted to build a new hospital, a new surgery center, or even add capacity to your hospital, you had to get permission from the state. And then what happened is other hospitals in your area could file to stop it. So it's like if you wanted to open a new restaurant, you had to ask permission of the other restaurants in the area, can I open the restaurant? Of course they're going to say no, right? So you have areas like this area and Somerville and Charleston. Correct.
Yes, I've seen them do that in the medical field.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
don't hold on to it, don't ever consider it because it keeps the hospitals from having this.
Yes, so you have these areas that are growing really quickly, and it can take 10 years to get a new hospital built. So for example, I had a bone scan, and it turns out they're saying I have osteoporosis, okay? So, you know when I can see my specialist? June. And I called 2 months ago. And that's because we've had Certificate of Need in place. Now,
Well, isn't all of that Obamacare?
no, that was
Everything's filtering down.
That was a state law that was put into place during, it was the 70s. I think it was Nixon era. Because Nixon, he was a Mr. Price Controls and all of that. So they thought somehow restricting health care keeps prices down. That was their idea. And it's passed in a lot of states, and it's been repealed in some states and not in others. So we got it repealed here, so now we should start seeing new healthcare facilities and hospitals growing and growing and growing. And they decide whether there's demand for it or not.
One of the things we're finding here, though, where we're finding it's hard to get care, like you said, you have to wait months and months. We're finding now you've got these large corporations coming in and wolfing up all the small private practices, all the small private medical services.
Yeah.
And so now, in order to get it, you have to either go through Tenet Health or MUSC. And of course, they have a limited number of staff to keep their costs down, which
Yeah.
means we have a limited number of staff, which brings our costs up. So what do we do about that, reversing
Well,
that trend?
Now there'll be, hopefully the free market will work out where if there's a long waiting list at some place, a new place will be able to open up and take and see that demand.
I'm afraid
and be able
Trump
to-
is gonna fix it. Basically.
well, no, Trump really has everything to do with
I'm
it.
afraid Trump is gonna fix all of this stuff.
Well, Trump can only do so much from the federal level. We have to be aggressive on the state level, and now is the
Oh, I
time to do it.
agree.
So, I mean, if we sit back and say Trump is going to fix it, there's a lot of things he can't do from being the president.
But
There are
a lot of
things that are
stuff was
responsible.
brought on during Obama with Obamacare.
Yeah, and Obamacare is still there.
It's still there.
It's
And
still there.
if they finally get into that, I'm hopeful. that-
I haven't heard anybody talking about getting rid of Obamacare since the Tea Party was started. I haven't heard anybody talk about getting rid of Obamacare because once a federal program is in place, it's very hard to get rid of.
Well, I feel the same way about the education department, but they're attacking that, so.
Yes, we'll see what happens. I hope they do get rid of the Department of Education. Will they?
Oh, I do too.
I don't know. Will they? We'll see.
I hope.
But yeah, there's a lot of things that we can only do at the state level, and we've really got to be paying attention. And you can have the most influence at the state level because you can get to know your state legislator, and once you get to know your state legislator, then you can have that relationship with them, and you can have a lot of influence, more than when trying to call Lindsey Graham.
So on the way over, I was listening to a podcast where Ken Paxton from Texas was being interviewed, and they've got a similar deal where they've got very part-time legislators, And basically his concept, and when you mentioned it, it kind of scared me, was that they're not making enough money even to be able to afford to go there 3 days a week. Is there corruption in your view in the?
No, I mean, they do, our people do get a stipend so that they can afford to get a hotel room or whatever while they're there. So I don't see that. I see legislators who want to do the right thing, but they just don't have all the information they need to do the right thing, which is where we come in. So we can say, well, here's the problem. Here's how Florida handled it. So Florida did joint several reform, and we can show, oh, here's how Florida did it, here's how the state did it, and here's how South Carolina can take what they did and do it here. So they're not having to reinvent the wheel on every single issue. We can come and help them with that. But I wouldn't say it's the only thing. I think the downside of them not making much money is that you either have to be independently wealthy, or you have to be retired, or you have to have maybe a law practice that can go on without you, so that you can participate. It would be hard for a regular working person to do this job.
Did I hear you say that there are like 5 that have 1 secretary? Maybe?
4 House members with 1 secretary.
Wow. I mean, that's hard.
It's very hard. It's very hard. So they're just
So when
overwhelmed
you're being
with so much
bombarded
information.
from all of the, from your district, it's very difficult to, that's pretty, whatever.
And when you go to
Every part-time.
scstatehouse.gov, and you can find who your state legislator is, and it'll give you a home address and phone number and a Columbia. Don't send your correspondence to the Columbia, because it'll get
It gets lost.
the one assistant is looking at all of that stuff
Right.
for 4 legislators. Send it to the home address, right? The most impactful thing you can do besides seeing a person is do a handwritten letter to their home address.
Right.
And tell your personal story and make sure they know that you are a constituent of theirs. Because they don't
That's
get
good
that
to
very
know.
much.
Anyone have any other questions?
Thank you for coming and telling us
Thank you
all
for
this.
having me, yes.
Well,
I'm happy to
on
be
the
here.
back of her thing, she has something over here that if you want to make a donation or learn more about it, you can go directly to the website,
Yeah.
which is palmettopromise.org. And yeah, I do get their emails, so that's why I was able to invite her.
And we also have, I started a C4, a new 501c4, really quick because I wanted to get the family stories out and wanted to put out a petition to try to get the legislature to come back. Again, it didn't work, but if you go to palmettopromiseimpact.com, you can see videos of the families giving their testimonies. They're just 30-second to 2-minute videos telling how their ability to put their child into a different school has changed their child's life. And it's really, really impactful, really impactful stories. I think they'll move you. So, and if you were interested in donating to the fund, the ESA, I call it the ESA Family Rescue Fund, to keep the kids in school for the rest of the year, if you go to our donate page, there's a box you can check so that your donation, instead of going to general funds, it'll go directly to the family. When it doesn't go to the families, it goes to the schools to keep the families in place in their schools. So that's been an interesting time because I've raised 3 times my annual budget and had to raise my annual budget. So it's been a challenge. Wasn't sure if I was going to be able to do it, but thankfully a gentleman by the name of Jeff Yass out of Pennsylvania stepped up and gave me the first $900,000, so that really got me going. So
Wow.
I know, isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Could I make an announcement?
Sure, go
I
ahead.
wanted to introduce myself. My name is Dan Reginald, and I wanted to tell you that I wanted to thank you, first of all, for your work against the sales tax.
Okay.
Anybody that can stop a sales tax, as far as I'm concerned, is a good person.
Sure.
Twice.
Yes.
Twice. We did it.
So I live here 6 or 7 months a year, so I started kind of following it, and I'm just appreciative. I also run in Cincinnati a free university. It's called Empower You America. We teach about 53 classes a year. Most of them are online. I've got a schedule of our classes I'll pass out. We've got some really good stuff. Our first class of this semester, we're having Naomi Wolf and Dr. Robert Malone.
He's on my show in 2 weeks.
To talk about the mRNA vaccines, and we've got a lot of stuff like that. We have Breitbart speakers pretty frequently, and one of our favorite speakers is Vivek Ramaswamy, who will be Monday, a week from today, he will be announcing his run for governor in Ohio. So you can watch all the classes on your computer, and I'll give you a schedule if you want to take a look. So good to meet you all, and thanks for your thanks for your work.
Hey, Ann, I just want to say, I sent it to you in private, but I really appreciate it. While I don't agree with everybody here on everything, points of convergence, that it's always interesting. But I want to say you put on some really good programs.
Oh, thank you.
And interesting stuff. This is one of them. You ran that one for the school bond piece, which was incredibly informative. I think you did one with the sheriff, PJ Tanner once. And that
Yes.
was great. So
We had Alan Wilson and Duffy Stone.
Yep.
Yeah. Matter of fact, next month, I have a friend of mine, Michael Letts. He was state police. He's the chaplain for the state police, South Carolina State Police. He's also highly involved in a lot of the law enforcement that goes on, not just in South Carolina, but nationwide. And I've had him on my show a few times. And if you want to know anything about border security and illegal immigration, he can keep you wrapped.
That was a major issue when we had PJ Stone, and he has really good insights as to why.
You mean Duffy Stone?
Yeah.
PJ Duffy, yeah.
And how often are the meetings?
We meet the third Monday of every month, with the exception of July in the summer and November, December, because it's around the holidays.
But I think it'd be interesting to hear law enforcement talk about what's going on with ICE,
Oh, yeah.
whether that cooperation that didn't exist before from the federal level down to local level.
What Michael also does is he has a nonprofit called Invest. And what it is they get donations in and they do fundraisers to get the bulletproof, the ballistic vests for first responders and law enforcement. And having to wear that thing every single day for 10 solid years, I was glad, I was. So from that perspective, as a former law enforcement, what he does is phenomenal. And like I said, I've spoken with him several times. He's scheduled to come down in March. I'm looking also if I can get the new county chair, Alice Howard, as well as the new school district chair, Richard Geyer, here at the same time. And one of those reasons why is that when I was fighting the sales tax here, I had gone to one of the public meetings, and Richard was there, and he was telling how the school district was able to do all the construction and remodeling projects within the county without raising a single dollar in tax. What they did was they floated municipal bonds. So the county got paid, earned interest on those bonds, as well as the person purchasing the bonds, which then paid for all the projects. And I asked Alice at the time, because she was at that meeting, she was hosting it, I said, why can't the county do the same thing? The two of you get together and work it out so that the county, instead of raising a sales tax, and you've got these pet projects like the bridge in Hilton Head or whatever else is going on, to pay for the projects without taxing the public. So hopefully we can get that going and get that working. So I'd like to have the two of them here at one of our meetings too. So that's what we got coming up in the near future. And please spread the word. I know I had at least a dozen or more people said they were going to show up, including our county councilman, David Bartholomew, but something must have happened with him. And I think that holiday threw everyone off too. But it's nice meeting new faces. And I want to thank Wendy for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, I didn't even understand.